This is Adventures in Queer Filmmaking. My guest today is Tina D Elia, a mixed-race Mexican lesbian queer identified feminist artist, a performance coach, an acting instructor, a SAG actor, a voiceover talent, an award-winning solo performer, a casting director, an executive producer, and a screenwriter. Whew, let me catch my breath. Tina, you're just such a busy person. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole de Manassas. I'm so honored. Thank you.
You have a lot of fires going on, a lot of different great projects, but you've been in the business a while. So I'd love to go back to maybe the early beginnings of what was the first love? Was acting the first love? Was writing the first love? What got you started?
Thank you. Yes. When I was about 4 or 5, acting was the first love. It was the first thing I found. I call it, I secretly baptized myself. While an actual baby's baptism was happening, like in the rectory of a Catholic church, we're talking early 70s, right? So I knew I was getting away with it by sneaking into a church, alone as a little girl and walking up to the altar, which of course is a no-no, and then having this whole performance experience of wanting to connect with an audience and wanting to get across a message. And, now granted the pulpit and the microphone, which I imagine the microphone was off, was very high, but I couldn't reach it. So I just had to improv. And then I kind of entertained, and this is all to my imaginary audience, but I had a drive and a desire to want to entertain, have people laugh, connect, express. So I had this desire. And what I think is positive is that both in my own family growing up, because we did a lot of just performing for fun or playing music, I just knew even as a kid, I want to do this acting thing for fun. And as I got older, I started to become more serious about it. But I did write little poems. When I was in 2nd and 3rd grade. And then I enjoyed creative writing in high school. And I found my way back at the end of my senior year in college before I knew what performance, poetry, spoken word was, I started writing poetry again. But I was I tried to direct some friends, and I wrote a long piece, and I did it for a project, sort of like a project thesis, but it wasn't a thesis. And I was kind of new. I was like, oh, this chapbook zine thing seems really cool. So what was awesome was that poetry and a performance poetry and spoken word got me into solo performance and writing solo performance then around 94, 95. So all of us to say, first love was acting, but that was also my trajectory as a creative writer into a solo performer writer.
I love that you were finding your voice even young in a church of all places, realizing that you had that yearning to perform, and that you were a star. That people just didn't know yet. They just hadn't taken notice yet, but they were going to. I love that. Growing up and looking for inspiration or looking for, discovering passion either in art or just sexuality. Was there any performer that spoke to you creatively growing up where you're like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, they're amplifying things that I want to experience or I believe in.
Yes. And from a child's perspective, it's funny how it looked, because it could look in many different ways, like Wonder Woman with Linda Carter, who's actually mixed race Mexican. So there was both I want to be a superhero. And of course I had Wonder Woman comic books, but it was also, we're of course still fighting for representation of female leads in television and film. And so as a kid, that spoke to me. Another thing that spoke to me that was interesting was that I grew up in Massachusetts. I was right around the corner from the Alcott House. A lot of kids grew up reading Little Women. And another love was Katharine Hepburn, who a lot of people didn't know is bisexual. And really nailed the role of Jo March from Little Women. Although what's cool and interesting about the actual story of Jo March, she wanted to be called Jo, of course. And people would say, she was like a boy and would sword fight and was a writer. But that in Little Women, she had to write that the protagonist ended up with a man, which was not her life as a woman, being a white woman and abolitionist. I think even her family tried to be vegetarians. They taught in a school. Right. She was really more of, sort of the, I want to say like a kind of a progressive suffragette. Anywho, so, but that was very influential because what I was also allowed to watch as a kid was a lot of old Hollywood movies. And, or like I said, if it was something like Wonder Woman or seeing comic strips. So those were the kinds of things that actually really influenced me. Another thing in the 70s, I went back to look at one point was, I don't think that she was, I don't know if she was Arab. I'm unclear how they cast, but there actually was a Saturday morning show that wasn't a comic strip called Almighty Isis.
Oh,
And yes, I know. And I think it was only on for one season. And they had what seemed to be, embodied this woman of color who would help save when crime happened or things would go down. And so these are my influences, Nicole. Before I started reading, in college, queer women of color writing, and then looking at performers, in solo performers, I think what's cool is, I was very influenced by Anna Devere Smith and Whoopi Goldberg, and then meeting and seeing Pamela Sneed's solo show in Boston. She's more of a Black New York queer artist who's been around for decades. So those were all my influences later. But when I was a kid, I think it's interesting that, what I could have my hands on in the 70s and then early 80s is so different, right? So it's either I'm going to see plays in my town, in the towns, or I'm going to see movies in the movie theater. But we're talking before VHS, people.
I still appreciate a theater experience. I want the extra soundtrack of watching a movie in a room with strangers, and we're experiencing something together at the same time. You just can't get that same experience at home. Right. I just don't, I don't take in the movie the same way. So I still miss that theater going experience.
Yes, I hear you. I totally hear you. And so I think I was, I was influenced by musicals. Of course, I was influenced by Julie Andrews. I think what's interesting is when I went to see Victor Victoria when I was in high school, I didn't even know what the movie was about, but I was already quite crazy about Julie Andrews because, I was allowed to go see first in the theater, The Sound of Music, before we watched on television again and again and again. So I think that there are themes to me about people on the female spectrum that are really talented, but also chose to embody many interesting people and characters and stories. So I found that to be, that there were sort of those kinds of themes going on. Also as a kid, I loved, there was a lot of magical stories that I enjoyed, like The Hobbit and all of that, but I really, as a kid and in my writing today, I feel like I was very influenced by sort of the Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass, because I identified more with stories about girls that it was like she wanted to be a queen, or she wanted to talk to the animals, or she was running after her own imagination world,
well,
which had nothing.
Alice goes on an adventure. Did you want to go on a journey, on an adventure?
Who doesn't want to go on an adventure? And we don't always have stories about girls going on adventure, and one that doesn't have to do with getting married, to a male. And so these were the kinds of things that really influenced me. And that there were a lot of little art houses. So I do remember, sort of going to the Betty Davis hour and the Joan Crawford hour in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And also I went to an artsy high school, and my brother went there too. And I remember before I got into the Cambridge School of Weston, a lot of family members were allowed to go see plays. And I would see these incredible young, these young women and girls in plays, whether it was Chekhov or who knows. And they were all my role models, just because, there was the town players doing all the musicals. And then it was sort of, to me, that felt like this other cutting edge influence. So yeah, so it's interesting, where I was looking towards, and to whom, and how it was changing. It was so much changed for us in the 80s and the 90s, because when I got to college, although I may be older than you, Nicole. But when I got to college, you know, that's when it was a really big deal. This bridge called my back, and Haciendo Cares, and Making Face, Making Soul, and Borderlands. And so some writers were writing nonfiction, but some were writing poetry, and then eventually writing plays. And then, so for me, I feel like I need to include a lot of women of color writers as influencers to me, because, it still is recent as far as, who we see on the screen.
Well, and they laid the groundwork for us. They made us dream and believe things were possible. Made us think, oh, maybe I could do that. And sometimes you need that encouragement of seeing someone else do it first before. I mean, just to be brave enough to step on a stage and be willing to be looked at, and or to have something to say. Be brave enough to say what you want to say.
Yeah.
I'm curious with your work as an acting coach. I feel like things have kind of come full circle for you, being a performer. But then maybe you can talk a little bit about your work with new talent and how fostering talent. How has that been for you, working with people coming up in their career as an actor?
Yes. Well, the first person there's so many people I have to thank, but because I've had so many mentors and so many different people I've learned from. But the first person I think of when I think about when I want to just sort of create like a small business and coach actors and public speakers is I had the honor in 2010 of working from like 2010 to 2016 as one of the casting associates for Nina Henninger Casting. And her mentorship was amazing because unlike kind of casting a project sort of one at a time and, here and there, when I was working so regularly, it meant that I started to chart how many actors I was working with per month, per day that might come in. So if it was 40, 50, or 60, or per month, and then per year. And then I started to realize, I was like, wow, I just went through and worked with, really, like improv and giving adjustments to like a couple of hundred actors. Now through the years, it's a couple of thousand actors. So learning the skill to coach and adjust quicker for people, and to kind of like look at a scene or look at a new role and play with it. Like, okay, we get it. We could address it this way or this, this way or this way, and refine that skill as a one-on-one coach or as an acting teacher, to sort of, for me to kind of translate both, like, one of my first loves, solo performance, but then my other love that, started to happen later for me, which was on camera work. And first it was film, and then it kind of grew into other genres besides film. So it is this great full circle. And, some people have had a lot of formal training. I feel like all of my training is through the mentors and directors and classes that I've taken through time. And the other sort of when people kind of describe the kinds of actors that didn't do formal structured training, I'm one of those people. And what's the through line is just, since I was a kid, I really followed a lot of whatever was influencing me, like consistently. So I can still see with my second solo show, when my character Tina Rivera becomes Groucho Marx, I can still see how Groucho influenced me as a child, and the Marx Brothers, is just as an example. But yes, so it's great bringing Bag of Tricks as an actor to coaching. So much fun. And then seeing what actors can do and how they can transform. And not every casting director or casting associate works the same way, but I come from the approach of, first an actor, and then when I was working with Nina, I really recognized that between 2010 and 2016, how much we needed to change, the landscape needed to change, and how much sort of DEI casting just was imperative that it happened. And how, I'd worked for over 25 years in nonprofit, like, you just have to be committed to outreaching beyond all these sort of traditional ways, outreaching beyond people that don't have agents, outreaching beyond the union, reaching out to people that might be like, I don't know, I do movement instead, or I write poems. I'm like, really taking the time to find talent everywhere, which perhaps as a director you found, that's sometimes how you find people.
I haven't had the extra money in my budget to actually bring on casting help. So it is a long search sometimes, but you're looking for magic. You're looking for someone that either maybe they embody that person, that authenticity you're trying to showcase, or they have a spark. They have a spark and you want to nurture that spark and see what can come from it. But yeah, I think there's a benefit to working with a casting director, and luckily on Dead in Love, I was able to have some really great talent from Latinx Mafia. And, there's just so many rich talent in the Bay that in terms of authenticity, I really like the idea of, showcasing talent and saying, if they're not already well known, that they will be. And so giving the opportunity to do that. I'm curious, just in terms of, we've all experienced a pandemic together. Has casting for you changed very much? Has it gotten easier or harder in terms of have people sending in self tapes? Anything we should know about? Has the process changed for you?
It has, and for me, I think what is helpful is it's faster for a lot of us casting directors, because we'll ask for self tapes and then sometimes we'll do callbacks on Zoom, and that can just be faster because we could have more people all together, in a virtual room. That doesn't include like who's going to drive and how far. And then, sort of, let's say, somebody's a parent and then they have, they need childcare. And so being an actor, I have so much respect for the fact that it's like, if one was supposed to go on 5 auditions in a week, you could be driving everywhere. So there is something to be said for an actor and a casting director that figuring out timing can help. And then I just finished teaching a class with San Francisco Acting Academy, and one actor said, and I so appreciated it. They were like, I just don't know much tech at all. So all they've known is auditions in person. So while the pandemic, some people are pivoting, and for me, it can make some of my life easier. I also do not want to lose people whom, like, first of all, having access to a computer that has a camera. And then
we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everybody has a phone in their pocket that usually has a camera. And hey, if you're old school, you got a flip phone, there's still a camera on that thing. There's still the ways around it. It doesn't need to be perfect, but just me personally, when I'm reaching out, kind of cold calling actors, going through backstage, and I'm looking do they have at least some kind of nice headshot? Is there some kind of social media that has some kind of relevant work that I can gauge a performance out of? And usually if they have those things, then I can reach out to them. There's someone who's followed through. They've given me the minimum of what I usually expect, and just trying to, I know that they're serious. They're taking their craft seriously. So doing that minimum is important.
For sure.
It is helpful when actors can come in person and perform. I had to cast, I had written a script, and I had worked with certain actors that I'd written for over a year. And then when it came time to shoot, life happens. People go off to grad school, different opportunities come up. And then I found myself recasting lead roles a month before production, and having to cast on Zoom. And, looking for my male lead, we found a really great actor, very tall gentleman. And the actors ended up being like steps, but it worked. We managed to make it work. But my DP was like, he's an attractive guy. He's a talented guy, but he's a tall guy, and it's hard to frame him. And so we were trying to be creative with our framing, and then also having to do some singles to connect the scene. And but that early on when you're casting them together and you're reading for chemistry. And I had to rely on reading for chemistry through Zoom. And surprisingly enough, the right actors, they were showing that they could have chemistry just doing scenes on Zoom. I'm like, it's going to be really great when we get them in person.
Yes,
it is a funny surprise when you're like, you're taller than I thought you'd be.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I think that is a very good example of shifting and right, it would be harder for
We're
some
gonna do
productions.
movie magic. We're gonna do Tom Cruise magic, and we're gonna stack a couple apple boxes, and we're gonna make our lead actress a little taller.
That's right. That's right.
But speaking
Yes.
of casting, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on how you approach casting Transfinite. Transfinite.
Yes.
So people who I have dogs here. They like to be a part of the podcast every now and then, so I apologize if you hear barking. So Transfinite came out in 2019. Transfinite is a sci-fi omnibus feature film composed of 7 standalone short stories where supernatural trans and queer people from various cultures use their powers to protect, love, teach, and fight and thrive. So, just the log line alone, that's awesome. I'd love to know how you approach casting this, and if you have any great stories with one of the producers, Stefano Gonzalez, and the director helping to bring this story to life. I'd love to hear about it.
Yes. So I love Transfinite. I love Nilo Buman's idea that I love when they told me all about it. They were like, Nilo Buman is a trans non-binary person of color, South Asian, and they had said to me, they'd actually said to me they had this idea, and they had talked to D'Lo about it, and D'Lo was like, yeah, what a great idea. So their vision was to have all trans people of color write screenplays in this film series. And then I was thrilled when they started working with Stefano. And so when Nilo came to me as a casting director, I feel like Transfinite is the perfect example of a challenging, perfect, wonderful, beautiful mix of how to cast and just reach the highest mountains to find people. So of everywhere. So first of all, it was really exciting because I think that Nilo's whole idea was completely trailblazing. And what was to me really fierce and kind of really was a catch-all was every story was going to be so different that, once you're kind of finished with one story, you're in a whole other, you go into a whole other room. So, so whether it was a story about, about kids, and then about lovers, and then about confronting white supremacy, and then, whatever was happening, if it was sort of like elders and martial arts. And when I was casting, I kind of did the whole, backstage SF casting, LA casting, and then I would cast, and then I would go through Facebook and all the community groups. And there was a couple roles that were really difficult. In particular, I found that there was 2 people with the same name that I found, but I couldn't find one. I don't know if you're looking at the Transfinite website or not.
I can pull up IMDb, but just off the top of my head, I remember some of the actors that are involved, like as Bridger Fox, Skylar Cooper. Skylar Cooper, I think, is coming from LA, but Bridger Fox was, I think, SF at the time, and some other actors. But you were also an actor in it as well. So
I was.
How did you? Was the part offered, or were you like, this is a great story? I could see myself playing this part. How did that discussion happen, or did the director see something in you?
I was really lucky that while I was casting the roles, the director had said, like, well, I've seen your work, and I already talked to the screenwriter D'Lo about their piece as Mango Blue. Do you want to consider this role? And I'm like, absolutely. I think it was Peacock. I think that's her name. Peacock Pink, I think was the role's name, if I'm not mistaken, which was so much fun. So that was a really beautiful surprise. That was a brilliantly beautiful surprise. So I remember I had so much fun casting Skylar, casting Shea Angelo Acevedo, finding Kelsey Umeko, Harmony Santana. That was amazing to have from LA. Carmen Moore. There's 2 Carmen Moores. Carmen Moore passed away. May she rest in power. She was cast in this really great film about 3 Native American people in New Mexico with different stories. And as a Native American trans woman, her story was really particularly moving. So I was aware of her work, and I went on what felt like the longest journey to find her. So I reached out to that filmmaker, Sidney Freeman. I'd reached out to my friend Shay, who's another amazing filmmaker. So I was like her friends. And suddenly on a Sunday morning, and Stefano Gonzalez was like, the producer was even like, I can help you look more, it was possible I could find somebody who might be indigenous, but this was a really specific project. And I
just want to give a shout out real quick to the film you were speaking of. It's called Drunk Town's Finest.
Yes, thank you. Oh my God, Drunk Town's Finest by Sidney Freeman. Such a good film. Such a good film. I really believe that, even if when you sign up to be a casting director, whether your budget is small or whether your budget is big, but even if your budget is small, the thing that's hard about being a casting director and working with casting is you could be spending hours and hours and days, and it can feel like basically 24-hour work. So I was in shock when I saw somebody calling in from Las Vegas, but I somehow was like, this is supposed to be a good sign. And then Carmen's voice was on the voice, and she's like, I hear you've been trying to get a hold of me. And I was like, how did I hit the jackpot? I mean, I think I hit it because I had reached out to so many people and just kept going. And then it was about, figuring out how to get her to come up here, and then, we're rehearse and work with Bridger Fox. So that to me was like, it was a huge success for all of us. And I feel like I truly believe that the work of casting and the work of authentic casting can be really hard, and it's so worth it. And I'm very critical of when I feel like people really fall short, especially if they have a budget. And if they are not doing any sort of authentic casting, I just feel like they've really failed what the purpose of what we're all doing.
Totally agree with that. In terms of like this project specifically, in terms of authenticity, you had authentic voices writing these complicated, interesting stories, these narratives. You had a director willing to bring this vision to life, and then the missing piece is finding the people to inhabit these characters. I know myself, just searching on Backstage, it can be limiting, but I encourage actors, do not be afraid to identify your true self. Because if you are restricted to how IMDb or Backstage or SF Casting is listing your content, they have a listing for trans actors, and some people aren't comfortable enough identifying, and then it's a very small list, and then you have to do your own research like you were doing and reaching out. Or another example of authentic casting, Sean Baker, I think we all have seen Tangerine, not just because it was the movie. It was one of the movies shot on an iPhone, but in terms of great performances by unknown actors at the time, that launched careers. And the way he approaches casting is he'll be just out in the world, and he'll just stumble across somebody at a movie theater or at a play, and take their information and hang on to that information for sometimes 2 years, and then you find those people in his latest film, Red Rocket. And
amazing.
It's just being open to talent, open to the possibilities, but like you said, open to authenticity. So
absolutely, yes. And
I also want to encourage people can find Transfinite on a lot of platforms right now. I always like to promote Lesflix. It's on there, but it's also on Amazon, Google Play, and other great resources. So I would encourage everybody to seek out this film and find it. Leave reviews whenever you support an independent production. Reviews really help so much, help amplify the project. So please check out Transfinite so you can, we're talking about it, but if you haven't seen it, I really encourage people to seek out the film and check it out.
Me too.
See, moving on, I'd love to hear, you do a lot of great work with Three Girls Theater. I know you're a passionate writer, plays and screenwriting. Do you have a specific process when you approach writing a new project or poem? Is there anything you'd like to share with people?
Oh gosh, yes, I'd love to. I believe in everybody finding their process that may look different. I'm grateful that early on in the 90s, I kind of started to figure out what it is. And then I just, continued to use the same kind of process today. So in Boston in the 90s, when I first started I was sort of like, how do I write a solo performance? It was like I was in a class. I then was doing development with the director. We worked together, we got it onto the stage. I did it again. And just sort of kept the development process going. So when I moved to the Bay Area in like 98, 99, right in the new year of 99, I found the same thing, like who was doing playwriting development work, who was doing solo performance development work. And I'd already been working with Mary Guzman. So that was beautiful. So I do believe it's really important for writers and screenwriters and playwrights and solo performers, find, a couple of directors, if you can, that you love to work with, or a couple of coaches, because if you enjoy working with them, for me as a writer, all of this work and imagination will just start to, soar, because it will start coming out in the development with another person, different ways to capture it, audio, video, old fashioned paper to pen, whatever, zooming it out, talking it out. For me, the sweet spot was walking into David Ford's class in 2011 and then introducing David and Mary together. And David was like, well, Mary's a director. So as the dramaturg, I'll just sort of, steer everything so that there's a platform so that you can move forward in your storytelling. So for the Rita Hayworth of this generation, when I wrote that solo show, and for Overlooked Latinas, when I wrote that solo show, and for the one that I'm still developing, The Breakup, a queer Latina Torch Song. And what I would say is, whomever you choose to learn and work from, I literally can start from nothing, Nicole. And within, at least in 10 weeks in David Ford's class, and then I'll do one-on-ones with other solo performers. It's sort of like you find other people, you bounce it off. I literally can have almost like nothing that was created. And then in 10 weeks, I have like a whole act or a whole section or a couple of them that I'm enjoying so much, but I'm enjoying them so much because it's not just a writing class as a solo performer. And I'm kind of taking it back and forth and just having fun. I cannot express how much I enjoy the having fun every time. I
also want to remind people,
yes,
if you're a filmmaker out there, if you're a playwright, still the value in hearing the words spoken where they start to come to life are so valuable, because you're going to hear what works and what doesn't. And for film specifically, film is a collaborative medium. I want to collaborate. I am not here to be a dictator, and I'm not here to be like, this is my vision or nothing. I want the collaboration, the interpretation. I want an open dialogue. And so, best idea wins. If you have a great idea, I want to hear it. And, I want to see if it works for the scene. But I feel like if you're alone in a shack somewhere,
right,
writing away, it's never going to fully develop, or you need that a safe space to work out ideas, workshop. Yeah,
that's right. Yes, I completely agree. And if, somebody is listening out there and this is all new, with the safe space and working stuff out, is that if it's working, what I find is that you're laughing with the people you're working with, that you come in, with what might feel like the writer problem, and you might go away with some ideas, but that you keep going back to sort of the different people that you're kind of sharing with or trading with, or doing the 20-minute shares or half an hour, or the group of 2 actors that you always have read things. And what I believe will happen, if finding that the magic in those things, is you walk away, you always start walking away with more. I mean, I can kind of walk in tired to a rehearsal with Mary and be like, I don't know where the scene is going, but I always laugh. Mary is on the floor laughing. So somehow we made, even if it's like, it feels like the smallest bit of progress. That's why I enjoy, the whole development process of what I'm doing and how I do it.
I do appreciate, like, sometimes, yes, you want, when you're going to film a scene, you want the script to be as tight as possible, but it is a happy accident when you can leave room for some improvisation. There's a scene that was improvised where it was initially just supposed to be, in my film Dead in Love, it was just supposed to be a short scene about consent, where the wife is consenting that the ghost can take over her body. But it turned into this improv about the wife showing the ghost how to give a blowjob, that men need more than kale. And the prop that they were using was a hairbrush. And this prop was being exchanged back and forth between the characters. And the actress playing the ghost was saying, what about butterfly kisses? What about teeth? And, the wife, what teeth? What are you kidding me? No butterfly kisses. So that was a fun little improvised scene. And we did it like a couple times, but each time they were upping the ante, and the crew, we had to do it a couple more times because people were just busting up laughing. They thought it was so funny. So
that's fantastic.
So I've been in the editing process showing that scene to people, and they're like, butterfly kisses. So it's getting a lot of laughs for an awkward moment that can have that levity. It's really fun. So
yes.
So in terms of some other fun acting,
sure.
Some of your other fun acting work, I'd love to hear about the process of doing Mary Guzman's Mechanic's Daydream.
Yes.
There's a specific scene that stands out for me, but since it sounds like you and Mary have had this nice working relationship and friendship for a while, maybe you could talk about that project.
That's a great question. What's cool is there were some spots that I don't know if they still exist today. I want to say they don't necessarily, but because one of them was the mechanics. I don't know if that same mechanic place, motorcycle mechanic shop, is still there. It's still there because it was featured in the film. There were some films being shot around the Lexington. What I can tell you is that Mary's friend Cian Murdy wrote this screenplay. I don't know at the time if they first had the idea because they were reflecting upon dating, but then their partner was one of the aerial performers, which I was so lucky in the short film. So they did have their girlfriend featured in the film. So that was exciting. And their girlfriend life partner is Sonia, who is an incredible circus performer, aerial performer. Props to her, because really.
Let me try and look it up. There's a lot of the performers. Those are just fun fantasy elements. So it was it's a really fun watch. And I definitely will leave the link in the show notes for people who watch our interview on YouTube, but we'll also try and make a note for the podcast version also.
Yes, because Mary knew that I would need to be coached by somebody who is a professional in order to do a stunt, because the magic of making this short film was there was going to be the equivalent of a PG-13, almost rated R money shot with clothes on, is how to have a moving vehicle and a lesbian, how to have it, make it look like there is a moving motorcycle on the street and two queer women, or a queer woman and a butch, or a queer woman and an AFAB person are having sex on the motorcycle. So all these questions come up. You're going to green screen it? No. You're going to have a stunt double? No. You're going to cut away somehow? No. Everything is going to be real. There is going to be a motorcycle. It is going to be moving, and I will be doing a stunt. I am not formally trained. I do not suggest this out there to anybody listening. Yes, I do believe in people taking risks, but I'm not going to suggest this to anyone out there. So what was great was that there was such a good crew, and my coach, Sonia is an aerial performer, has performed off MGM studios, MGM in Vegas, major buildings off of in cities in Brazil. So this is somebody who is so well trained. And I'm like, this is not my forte. So I had to learn with the motorcycle not moving, how to move on a motorcycle, how to move your feet and two boots into one pedal, how to turn, how to do it gracefully, how to do it with passionately, how to be sexy. And she's like,
so there's no carrier van or something that was locked in, and to still just put the camera up a little higher. It was
so they took the motorcycle and they tied it down to a flatbed truck. So, and then they shot above. So then they had to have a camera high enough to shoot above. So while the flatbed truck moved very slowly with a motorcycle on it, and I'm in back, I have to slowly learn how to move around the motorcycle.
Still dangerous, but yeah,
Still dangerous. And
it had the right effect though to get the right look.
to get the right look.
Yeah.
Yes. And it did get a stunt award from like Morehouse, like I want to say somewhere up, it was either Montana, which was very sweet because I'm thinking that's probably going to be my only stunt, people. That was it. But I just want to make sure I give
I'm trying to look up the other performers' names. So I will have to look it up later.
Yes.
I would say I would love as a producer to read more scripts where it's like has sex on a moving vehicle, lesbian, queer sex scene.
Queer sexing on a moving vehicle. Yes.
Fun thing to find in a script.
And then randomly a minibus and a FedEx truck pass by right as I'm starting the sex. And I think to myself, maybe that minibus is empty. And then I go, nope, it's full of people. Why don't I turn my head away? Because I got to stay.
Production value. Yeah.
Yes.
Value.
So this was all caught on camera very briefly. You know, the muni and the FedEx truck. And what I'll say is that there was a lot of like, we're going to keep sort of doing whatever we can to rehearse, to practice, to keep it safe. And to me, that is the name of the game, that if I literally know the steps, the really slow steps of rehearsal, it's true. We could all be Baby in Dirty Dancing in our own version, but
I mean, I'd love to see that. I know Frameline one year did all these, they replicated all these famous scenes from different movies with queer actors. Like there was Goodfellas, there was The Graduate. So yeah, I'd be all for queer versions of Dirty Dancing for sure.
Me too. And I feel like the reason why I want to sort of say like, you know, any of us could do so much more than we could. But to me, yes, it's all about like safety training, you know, doing it one step at a time, having all the safety things in place. So I will say it was, I think that was one of the most edgy, like risk-taking things I will have ever done, because, you know, it's a harder thing to get a permit today and be like, we would just, you know, we're going to just try to, well, we're trying to tell a story.
Yeah, today I think people would probably err on the side of caution and be like green screen all day. And you know, wind machine. We're gonna Photoshop a bus.
That's right.
That's right. I appreciate it as a film. I like that it exists. I like that it showcases the city, and I think it's a fun little performance of yours that existed. More people should see it. I think it's really fun. Well, going on to some of your more recent work, the award-winning web series Assigned Female at Birth.
Yes, Learlin K is amazing. They wrote it, they directed it, they are the showrunner, they are acting in it. And I am on their diversity team, which is great. But yes, so Learlin wears more hats of anybody I've probably ever met in my life.
It's an interesting web series in terms of diversity and showcasing different bodies. Yeah, I'll give a quick synopsis. Assigned Female at Birth, a web series about some bodies. This award-winning series, which premiered on YouTube back in October 2020 and is currently filming, was filming season 3. I'm sure season 3 exists, was created from 50 interviews with non-binary trans people and women about their relationships and their bodies, gender, size, ability, and age. Documentary style, 4 sections, interspersed film senses about an agender trans man who wants to get married in a dress, Zerb mixed race lover who is definitely not on board, a Black lesbian who doesn't like trans husband's new penis, and a non-binary therapist with a diagnosis of their own, working to commit to their recovering addict partner. So there's a lot of interesting characters going on, or representing different characters going on.
Yes.
In that series.
Oh my God. AFAB was such a gift when AFAB web series about some bodies, when it came along in 2020, just because the first 2 seasons, which we all wanted to be doing creative things. And it was like, what do we do? So much stuff is, you know, canceled because there's no live performances. So, and Learlin got right to work with the interviews and talking to people about, about disability, about intersection of race and size and gender identity. And so what I love is all the stories that Lyralyn is telling came from actual people that wanted to tell their stories and tell what part of their stories they wanted to share. And then be able to say and look at the, hear the script read out loud in the readings and say, yes to all of this, or can you amend this a little bit? And that comes out of Lyralyn's background doing devised theater, which is why so many people love devised theater, which is, if anyone needs a reference to devised theater looks a lot like Anna Devere Smith doing interviews with people about something that's happened, say, the LA riots, and then meeting different people in communities and talking about, the impact of what's happened. So that devised theater. So devised theater and film is very similar in terms of, talking to people and getting consent around the kinds of stories of their lives they want to tell. And, things that may change might be people's names, so, where they're from, there may be specific things that change. But so what's exciting is, and I play Sophia. Sophia's gone on a journey, I'll just say that. But what I love is season 3 was so exciting because we shot it together finally in the, last month in the middle of winter in January. Some of it was shot in the fall, but for most of us, it was shot in the winter for those of us that weren't local Boston. And what was so exciting was, I think it was for me, it was the most diverse around people with disabilities, for sure. There's no question about that. And the other thing that was exciting too was people that were much younger than me. And then there are some characters that are elder in the show as well. So I feel like the commitment of wanting to make sure that there was intergenerational, that there were BIPOC voices, and that casting was done so that whether it was somebody, someone who's disabled, who uses a wheelchair, or a person with that is multiple, which also people use the term plural now too. I just don't oftentimes see, sadly enough, casting that actually includes people's lived experience. So I was so excited just because I'm excited to watch other people's work and scenes and the work that I got to do. So yes, season 1, season 2 on YouTube. But season 3,
free, it's available, no excuses, guys.
That's right.
You support queer content, especially the diverse queer content. I'll just say this, I like in the first season, your character is the love interest that's between 2 siblings, where the one jealous bisexual sibling is commenting on how hot your character is. I thought that was really funny.
Me too.
The other sibling is just, everything's just a little easier for them, and but it's cute. And in terms of stories and even the way it's filmed, being very creative filming during the pandemic. And so that's great to hear that during season 3 you were able to actually be in person, collaborate, and experience that together. That's awesome.
Yes, very exciting.
So I'm curious what if you can speak a little bit about what you're writing and working on now. You had mentioned the title before.
Yes.
Say it again so I don't butcher it. What was the title?
Sure.
So song was in it, so I want to.
Yes. So I'm happily, slowly but surely developing. And what's funny is my solo shows, a couple of them I see as different kinds of web series, but and definitely I see that for The Breakup, exclamation point, a queer Latina Torch Song, is my new show in development. All of my shows are my style of solo performances. All of my shows are fiction. So I really speak more through the characters that I create and that I spend time on developing over time. And I'm used to having characters inside of me, and characters that, one might think that I'm writing them, but really I feel probably like they're talking to me and they're writing. They're really doing the writing. So that show has been really fun, where I did a Zoom reading. I want to say it was in June of 2021. And then I just did another excerpt that's on YouTube, because it's on the Marsh website from like February 1st. I was like, oh my God, there's like, I love that you can watch free excerpts and shows from the Marsh Stream website, which is so great. So even though I had done a version of the show workshop through Brava on Zoom in early June, and Mary Guzman directed, and what I wanted to do was, what's funny is, so during the pandemic, I fell in love with music and like 80s music and new wave and all this all over again. It's not that I didn't, it's just like I had a whole love affair. So the funny thing was, like, all these playlists were going. And then I was like, okay, I've got to create a story about somebody going through a breakup and they're kind of alone in their home. And finally they're just going, they've had it, they can't let go of, they've got the Titanic necklace of their own. If anybody knows that reference. Right. So she's got her Titanic necklace. She just can't let go of these things. In fact, they're so loud, they start, kind of yelling in the closet, the ex's stuff, right?
Like the telltale hearts just under the floorboard beating, huh?
That's right.
Okay.
So there it is. And she's like, I got to get out of here and find like a little queer group. So it's not a traditional support group, the recent breakup support group, because she's like, how do you have a wine cellar here? Like, we got a lot of snacks. And they're just like, hey, we're just here to have a support group. But it is a little bit kind of like Alice in Wonderland, up in the sky, is like, where did I just fall into? And why is this magical person coming in and kind of reading where we are and leaving? And so they're like, well, you got to tell us your story about a breakup. So we learn a lot about her ex.
You got to earn your snacks.
Got to earn your snacks, because there's a lot of snacks, a lot of food. And she really does want to be like, where is the good Pinot, and where is the good Malbec? And they're like, you're going to have to wait. So she begins to tell this story about falling in love with this butch Latina, HR Rodriguez, who drives a motorcycle, and this love affair that's incredible. It's just that HR loves to transform rom-coms, and they're like, we're going to rewrite them together and like play them out. And so HR and her seem like the perfect couple. Trina, the protagonist, and HR. It's just one thing that HR is really attached to their two cats. And the two cats start off, and there are a lot of energy, and then suddenly it's kind of like being at war with the cats. And so the cats kind of create a chasm in this relationship. I'd gotten a grant from SFAC, and I'd hired my brother and his girlfriend Andrea to create some music, and I'd hired my nephew, who's a musician. And Aiden said, he's like, it was never about the cats in the relationship. It was like, I think it was more exactly. He's like 18. He's like, I don't think it's about the cats. I think
so insightful. Wow.
So insightful. I'm like, he understands symbolism and metaphor. And he was just like, what if there's a sound of, like, I've said some levity, or what if a new cat comes along and suddenly it's like, this character doesn't hate cats. It was just, it had to do with the relationship. So the magic of this story and the way I framed it and continuing working on it is, I really only told Trina's story, the protagonist, but I don't just have to tell her story. She went to the group, she met a few people. So I went back into class and I'm like, I don't even need to talk about Trina. Let's talk about a different character and how they ended up here.
Oh, that's exciting. Is the plan to, since you've already workshopped it a little, is the plan to possibly do a live performance once you feel further along with it?
It is. And even if I write everybody's even if I write so many stories I couldn't fit into one show, I guess I'm saying this to all the writers out there and creators, which is it's still all worth it. Like, even if it's backstory work, even if it doesn't make it into the final cut of the live play, it doesn't matter. You've now known who these people are more, you're more attached to them, more humor comes out because, suddenly there's like, there's intricacy, there's sort of a little intricacies. So anyway, so yes. And hopefully on May 14th at the Myra Theater Guild in Vallejo, Mary and I will be putting on Overlooked Latinas, my solo show that premiered at the Brava in 2019. So stay
That's
tuned
great.
for May 14th.
That's exciting. I hope that that actually happens. So how can people support your work? I know, or if they want to connect with you as an acting coach or a casting person,
Yes.
would you like to plug your wares right now?
Sure. Thank you so much. So all of my acting stuff and solo performance stuff is tinadelia.com, the TINADELIA.com. And then all of my coaching and casting work and classes is through tinadeliaconsulting.com. So 2 different websites. You can find me 2 different ways. I am on the Facebook. I am
Facebook. Are you on the line on the Instagram?
Right. I am the Tina D Elia SF on the Instagram. I love the craft. I love people telling stories. I love working with actors. I love talking to folks about film and solo performance. And I love, Nicole, how much you just are, bring so much excitement about talking about so many genres. And I love that you created this podcast.
Well, thank you so much just for sharing your time and your stories with us. I think it's just so important, again, amplifying more creatives in this space, queer space as much as we can. Yeah. So I just appreciate it. I hope people reach out to you, and one day we'll get to work together. We keep doing this back and forth, but you're a busy woman, so I got to bide my time. So.
Right. Well, I'm very excited, Nicole. I can't wait to see Dead in Love. So
yeah, we're working on some fun, like physical events. I'm trying to team up with different, queer and women businesses so that it can be really an event that we can partner with and give people an excuse to go to a theater, get dressed up, have a good time. So
yes, indeed.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
My little dog, I guess, she's been wanting to be a part of this podcast. I could probably only edit so much of her out. Sure. But again, thank you again for your time, and just looking forward to more of your work and just supporting you as you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nicole. What a pleasure to be with you.